The Prime Minister of our country, Narendra Modi, has broken his silence on the alleged Indian agent plot to assassinate the Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. The Prime Minister has spoken about India's commitment to the rule of law. The Prime Minister also raised India's concerns about the activities of certain extremist groups based overseas. He spoke about how these elements, under the guise of freedom of expression, have engaged intimidation and incited violence. At the same time, the Prime Minister also spoke about the strong bipartisan support for strengthening India-US relationship, which is a clear indicator of the mature and stable partnership. He also emphasized upon how security and counter-terrorism cooperation was a key component of India-US partnership. And it would not be fair to link a few incidents with the diplomatic relations between the two nations. What are the implications of this statement? What goes on between India and US behind closed doors? And how can the alleged Pannun assassination plot crisis be handled is interesting to see. What is also equally interesting to observe would be that the US cooperation in fighting the Khalistani terrorism on foreign shores of America and Canada, and finally consenting to India's repeated requests of extraditing the 2611 terrorists Tahawur Rana and Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, keeping with following the rules of law. Let's start my conversation with Major General Dhruv Katoch. Now, General Katoch, in a situation where the matters regarding alleged assassination attempt of Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, he is a notorious Khalistani terrorist. He has been designated by India as a terrorist. There have been a number of deportation calls that have been made by India to the Canadian authorities as well as the American authorities, but to no avail. In a situation such as this, there has been a clear-cut statement that has been made by the Prime Minister. This is also the first time that the Prime Minister has spoken about this entire Pannun crisis. How is it that the Americans and the Indians are now going to deal on a diplomatic level to figure out a way that is going to be a face-safe for both the countries?
Thank you, Megha. Megha, I think there has been a problem with this Pannun affair, and it has affected bilateral relations between the two countries. But now, I think diplomatically, a lot of things have been sorted out, which is why the Prime Minister has made this statement while being interviewed by a particular newspaper. Now, the statement is very important because the Prime Minister specifically stated that between countries there will be issues, but that will not affect, it doesn't necessarily have to affect bilateral ties, which means that at the upper level between the Prime Minister of India and the President of the United States, there is a different type of rapport which exists, and this will be, this particular instance will be dealt with. Diplomatically, I think it will require to be dealt with a bit more. But I think the more important message which the Prime Minister delivered this time was, you cannot keep terrorists on your soil. And he made that very clear that we are all fighting terrorism. And if he could be a Khalistani, you don't have to be necessarily an Islamist terrorist. He's a Khalistani. He threatened to blow up planes. He threatened to kill Indian diplomats. And he is speaking from within the shores of America. He's an American citizen. He has also got Canadian citizenship. Now, such behavior, I think the Prime Minister has made it very clear, is also unacceptable. So, two things have happened. One, there is an alleged plot to have killed Pannun. The Americans claim they have some evidence. Well, they can share it with us, and the Indian authorities will do what is required. But at the same time, the Prime Minister has made it clear to them that you are hosting a terrorist in your land, and you need to do something about it. That notwithstanding, I think the relationship between the two countries is much too important, especially in the Indo-Pacific. And I don't think we are going to, this Pannun affair is really going to derail that relationship anymore.
Okay. Ambassador Sikri, what is your view on the matter? Now, on one hand, there has been aggressiveness that has been shown by the Americans. A number of their delegates have been coming to India raking about this entire Pannun assassination plot, an alleged Pannun assassination plot. We have seen a number of statements that have come in from Antony Blinken and the US State Department Secretary. And at the same breath, there is no talk whatsoever when it comes to the extradition requests India has made repeatedly for Tahawur Rana, the 2611 terrorist who is hiding in some part of America.
Well, I think that the key factor that has come out from Prime Minister Modi's interview to Financial Times is this focus on a mature and stable partnership, and saying that this partnership is mature enough to take on board any differences that may be there between the two sides. Now, clearly, that's one point he's made. The second important point he has made is about the strong security and counter-terrorism cooperation between India and USA. And in this context, the alleged attack, the participation of Nikhil Gupta, the alleged plan to, on Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, all that is part of it. But I think the maturity comes out because India has agreed, based on specific evidence given by the US side, to launch a high-level inquiry. The high-level committee has been set up. The inquiry is going on. All the factors are being taken on board. For example, we are seeing information in the newspapers that there was talk about a so-called case against Nikhil Gupta in Gujarat. But the Gujarat government has said, as far as we know, there's nothing that we ever have against anybody called Nikhil Gupta. So these things are all matters that are coming out in the inquiry.
Yeah.
And both sides are patiently waiting for the results of the inquiry. Anthony Blinken has spoken about the seriousness of the case, but he's also said that he's waiting for the results of the inquiry. So I think the symbolism of the maturity of the relationship is very important. Differences will be there. And it is quite unlikely that India and USA will ever agree 100% on every subject under the sun. But the way in which it is being handled is an example of great maturity and the importance that both sides are attaching. Because when we are talking of the importance of security and counterterrorism cooperation, you have to know that on these matters, you won't always agree. But both sides must be able to place their position very clearly. And what you have said about the significance of the Khalistani, these so-called Khalistani groups living in Canada and USA, this is very important that those countries must understand the situation in India is quite different. There is no political party in India that supports Khalistan. The people of Punjab don't support Khalistan. The Sikh Gurdwaras don't support Khalistan. So why is it that a few odd individuals living abroad are doing this? I think this is a very important point for India to explain and seek the cooperation. The second point, final point I'd like to bring out is that what is happening in India, between India and USA on this situation with Gurpatwant Singh Pannun is quite different from what has happened between India and Canada, because there were no specific evidence at all so far that has been provided by the Canadian side. They're only talking of credible allegations, and there's really no such thing in any evidentiary case. So I think that that despite whatever the Prime Minister of Canada may be saying, that situation is very different, and the way it is being handled between India and the USA is also very different and indicative of a strong outcome based on mutual understanding and mutual benefit in the relationship between India and USA.
Right, absolutely. Shekhar, another point that I want to highlight over here is, as Ambassador Sikri said, that there are some cracks appearing in the case that has been well built by the FBI. Talking about how the Gujarat court and the Gujarat police have no indication, they don't have no idea of the case that is being referred on Neeraj Gupta. And they say there were no charges that were levied against him. So they are completely unaware and kept under the dark about what is it that the FBI in America is talking about. And then the case that was registered, and then the petition that went to the Supreme Court of India talking about how Neeraj Gupta and his family were being ill-treated. They have been trying to return home, but they have not been given access to any of the facilities, any of the amenities, and they are being treated like prisoners. Now, these are two, contradictory developments that have taken place, and I would call it as flaws in a well-constructed case by the FBI. Now, while we also witness that the kind of importance the government of India holds in the allegations that have been put forth by the FBI, is that our Prime Minister himself is coming out and speaking about this. How do we deal with this situation? Like I said, is there a face save over here?
I think if you look at from a broader perspective, what the Prime Minister did, and in his interview, he's made it very clear that this is an India which is very assertive. This is an India, which has made a very strong statement on freedom of expression. He's also categorically mentioned that this world is interconnected as well as interdependent, and which basically means you might have differences as country, but at the end of the day, the collaboration is important. So I think the reaction of India, our leadership, is very matured. We are not indulging in mudslinging. We are holding on to our points very dearly, which was not the case earlier. And I think the Honorable Prime Minister's communication here in terms of setting the ball straight in terms of what he's expecting the viewers is very clear. Now, I also believe we have also seen this in the recent past that this is an India which is a reflection of what we are all about. Very assertive, not aggressive, which is also very clear, which also tells US where they stand in terms of relationships. And India is also trying to play an equal role here in this relationship. It's not like India can be bullied or dominated. India is making the points very clear in terms of what they expect from this relationship. And with this threat by this Khalistani leader, Pannun, I think it all goes down to show that these threats are taken very seriously at the highest level. And I think what the Honorable Prime Minister did in terms of making a statement also reflects what India thinks about how do we handle terrorism in the future and in the present, and also how do we work with our collaborative partners on this without using all the diplomatic channels possible, being assertive, not being aggressive, and making a strong statement about being interconnected as well as interdependent.
Right. Major General Dhruv Katoch, now India has faced a number of challenges, and we talk out of experience because at one point of time, I think international agencies, bodies, we talk about countries including America and Europe, of course the OIC have been very categorically critical of the Kashmir matter. We have time and again spoken about how there is the terrorism situation that has now been brought under control after abrogation of 370 particularly. But it has had taken efforts after efforts in terms of propagating the message, in terms of using our PR machinery on the international level for now letting the world to know that Kashmir is a sovereign and integral part of India and it is an internal matter of India. We would not seek interference from anybody who is living out of India, who is not part of India. Now, I want to come to the point where the Financial Times and any other international news channel or a newspaper or a news agency, particularly from the Western Hemisphere, continues to talk of Khalistanis as separatists versus India calling them as designating them as terrorists. We have traversed the journey of the world calling Lashkar-e-Toiba as terrorists, as a separatist, and then move to calling it a terrorist. How do we finish this journey of the gap that has been created between a Khalistani separatist versus a Khalistani terrorist that India at this point of time wants to achieve?
Megha, I think as far as the Kashmir issue is concerned, I think India has handled it diplomatically very well. And very frankly, Kashmir is no longer an issue of international importance. It has been put into the back burner, and the Indian stance has been taken due note of, that Kashmir is an internal matter between India and Pakistan, or rather it's basically an internal matter of India. And even Pakistan, the only issue which we have with them is when are they going to return Gilgit-Baltistan and Mirpur Muzaffarabad. But otherwise, I think Kashmir on the world radar, it has been wiped out. Now, as far as the Khalistani problem is concerned, it has not been wiped out. And the reason is because the West has not been hit by Khalistani terrorism the way they have been hit by Islamic terrorism. Now, the day we find bombs going off in Canada or in the United States, which can be attributed to Khalistani terrorists, that is the time I think their antennas will go up and they will start taking action. But for the moment, I think what the United States and European powers who are aligned with the United States are doing is they are using this as a tool really to browbeat India. You know, when they talk of human rights, etc., and when they put in the Khalistani angle and freedom of speech, etc., they are really using these as a tool to browbeat India to follow their policies on certain issues like the Russia-Ukraine war.
Right.
But I think India has outgrown that now. India has made it very clear we are not going to follow the Americans or the Russians or anybody else. India is going to look after India's self-interest. And that stance has been made very clear. It's a good thing. Our diplomacy is strong. Politically, I think both the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister have made this stance very clear. And Indian think tanks are all on board as far as this issue is concerned. So I think it'll be a matter of time before the West also gets on board and diffuses the terrorist activities or potential activities which can take place, especially in Canada, in the United Kingdom, and in the United States.
Okay, all right. Ambassador Sikri, now amongst a series of comments that were made by the Prime Minister during the interview, another aspect that he raised was that agreement on all matters was not the prerequisite for having collaboration between both the nations. And I think that's the fact of it, whether we talk about buying Russian oil or having cordial relationship with Russia, even as US has since time immemorial had a Cold War right after World War II and has continued up until now. This is one more example of agreeing to disagree and still carrying forward with our strong strategic relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think through all these months and years of the Ukraine-Russia war and now the situation on the ground in the Hamas-Israel war, India's foreign policy based on strategic autonomy has come out loud and clear and very, very strong. So India is very attaches the highest importance to developing a close relationship with the USA. As the Prime Minister said in his interview, there is strong bipartisan support for this close relationship with USA, and that makes it even more important and serious for the government to carry it forward on the basis of this bipartisan support and strong support from the people of India. But certainly when it comes to an issue like Khalistan, there is again, as I said, there is a strong domestic consideration as well. We are determined to end all terrorism and illegal activities and separatist activities on Indian soil. We have just seen, as General Gurpatwant said so clearly, that with the abrogation of Article 370 and the support of the Supreme Court of India that we saw last week, the whole issue of Kashmir has now been laid to rest. J&K is an integral part of India. There is absolutely no question that Article 370 was a completely temporary provision, and that the elections will be held in J&K in the near future, and the democratic roots will be strengthened there. There's been a sharp fall in all kinds of activities within the state which were there earlier, stone throwing and so on. And the people of J&K are tremendously happy that their economy is prospering. Millions of tourists going there every day. Now, if you look at Punjab, it's the same thing. Are they looking at the Khalistanis? No, not at all. They want their economic development. They want their economic and part of India. So I think this point that the Prime Minister made is that we have our own domestic considerations to look at, but we will take them on board. And if America has given us some evidence, we have given it all seriousness and appointed a high-level committee. So this is the way in which bilateral relations will go ahead. And I think India's commitment to its own domestic concerns, its commitment to end terrorism, its commitment to ensure secure and stable life for every citizen. This is respected and must be respected within the country and outside. I think the USA, Canada, they're all realizing this, and they will, I'm sure, accept it. But I think we need to bring this out a little more clearly because, we perhaps have not been giving maybe... Khalistan is not an issue within India, so you don't, take it up in such a big way with the others. But now, with this incident having come up, I think the Indian government, the Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are all looking at it very seriously to bring out to these countries that there is the international police, there is the Interpol notices. They have to be respected, just as we would respect any notice received through Interpol from any other country.
Right.
So they must respect it also. So this is a part of building diplomatic relationship and understanding. And I think not only in diplomatic talks, but at all levels, youngsters, academia, think tanks in the USA and Canada, this must now be brought up in a strong way to get up across.
Shekhar, my only concern and a grudge with the government of India is that why have we not been able to showcase the equal aggressiveness that comes from the Americans when we talk about say Pannu at this point of time, wanting him to be extradited and deported to India, or for that matter Tahawur Rana. Why were we so hesitant in sending our CBI or RAW to America to demand that listen, there is safe harbors that are being given to Tahawur Rana, who is a 2611 orchestrator, terrorist. He has fled from India. It has taken you 15 years just to designate him as a terrorist, and it's high time you extradited him into India. Why has this sort of a firm, aggressive stance not come from the Indian government so far?
I think, Megha, you hit the nail on the head. I think previously we've always had governments which even shuddered the idea of even saying the name of terrorists. People who came in for the Mumbai blast which happened, nobody wanted to name them, but we all knew it. Everybody knew it, and I think this is a different India. This is an India which is very assertive. And I think these statements by the Honorable Prime Minister, not just statements which are made because he's in a good mood or on a bad mood, but the statements which also reflects action which is taken by the Indian government. I think if you look at it from a larger perspective, it's about maintaining a good relationship with the US also, but without letting your guard down. I think that's what is happening here. This is a very a different India, and I'm being very positive and optimistic about it. But it also goes to show the kind of leadership we have over the last 8 to 10 years and what we want to do vis-a-vis with the US. I think the relationship has also undergone a change over a period of time. It's not been the same in terms of trade, in terms of security, and in terms of what India is demanding from the US. And like I said earlier, India is demanding. India is not just listening into what people have to say about security and terrorism in India. And I think the fact that we are having a conversation on this today, we are openly naming and shaming these terrorists, which just goes to show that we have come a long way from what we were earlier. I think when the Mumbai blast happened, we were not willing to take names. Now that's changed completely. I think it's all purely because this is a new India. This is a very self-reliant India. This is an India which looks out for itself, and we have seen that in the post-COVID scenario, in the wars which happened in the past. India has always been very clear about where it stands and how it's managed itself diplomatically and in this new world order. So I think it's very good, very different, and I'm sure we're seeing India actually taking charge in situations like this. Rather than waiting for things to happen, they are making things happen. And these statements by the Prime Minister, these statements, if you read into it, it speaks a lot. It speaks about something which Modi calls the Modi ka guarantee. I think that's really important for all of us to reflect on.
Okay. All right, absolutely. Okay, I'm out of time. And I thank all of you for joining me and sharing your views on this matter, on this very important topic. But one thing is very clear, that the Prime Minister has made it amply clear and in a black and white statement saying that yes, India is looking into the matter, we will follow the rule of law, but at the very same time, there needs to be no tolerance for terrorists who, under the garb of freedom of expression, are then inciting violence, inciting hate, inciting terror, particularly against India. And when you talk about having a separate state of Khalistan, you are actually impinging on the sovereignty of the country, and this cannot go unpunished.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.